She grew up in a small village surrounded by endless cornfields. From the outside, her life looked simple. People saw an ordinary girl who helped her family, rode an old motorbike, and fixed farm tools when they broke. But inside, she carried a quiet fire that no one could see. She loved the sky more than anything on the ground. Even as a child, she would lie on the grass and watch clouds drift across the blue space above. She always felt the sky calling her, like it was waiting for her. Her village had no airport, no flying club, nothing close to aviation. The only thing that came near were old crop-dusting planes that flew low over the fields every summer. She would watch them from the edge of the corn rows, her eyes shining. When she became older, she finally convinced the local crop pilot to let her clean the planes in exchange for sitting inside the cockpit when they were parked. She touched every button with respect. She memorized every gauge. She studied the stick and throttle like they were her future tools. When she turned 18, she asked the crop-dusting pilot if he would teach her to fly, even though she had no money to pay him. The pilot laughed at first, thinking she was joking. But the next day, he saw her standing at the gate at sunrise, waiting silently. She kept showing up until he finally agreed. His rule was simple: you work harder than everyone, and you don't quit. She didn't quit. Not once. She learned slowly at first, shaking with nerves during the first takeoff, gripping the controls too tight. But after a few minutes in the air, something changed. She became calm. She listened to the engine. She felt the wind. She followed the horizon with steady eyes. The pilot noticed it instantly. She was not just learning, she was becoming a part of the aircraft. Within months, she could take off, turn, climb, descend, and land smoother than most trainees. The pilot told her she had a natural gift. But she didn't focus on praise. She only focused on becoming better. Soon she earned a small nickname from the old pilot and workers: Cornfield Flyer. Some used it with pride. Others used it as a joke. They thought she would never fly anything more than an old farm aircraft. But she didn't care. Every hour she spent in the sky was precious, even if the plane was slow and old. One evening, while returning from a long crop-dusting run, she did something unusual. The sunset was glowing orange, the sky clear and peaceful. She gently pushed the aircraft higher than normally allowed. At that height, the fields below became endless gold, and the sky above turned from orange to purple. She felt a deep pull inside her chest. This was where she truly belonged. That night, she sat on the roof of her small house and whispered to herself, "Someday, I'll fly something faster, something stronger, something that can touch the edge of the sky." But life pulled her back to reality. Money was short. Her family needed her. She had no path to military aviation, no connections, no formal education in flying. She accepted a fact many pilots face: sometimes dreams stay dreams. Still, she didn't stop flying. Every season she flew through narrow field lanes, sharp turns, sudden winds, and low-altitude passes. She built skills without even knowing how rare they were. Her reflexes became sharp. Her awareness became perfect. She learned to predict wind changes by watching how corn leaves moved. She could sense turbulence just by looking at the clouds. One day, while practicing sharp turns above the cornfields, she tried a maneuver she had only seen in videos. It was a smooth, controlled high G turn, followed by a quick roll into a straight path. She didn't tell anyone she practiced such moves. She knew people would think she was being reckless. But high in the sky, with no one watching, she tried it. And she did it perfectly. That day, she realized something important. She could handle more than a crop plane. She had something inside her that trained. Pilots work years to develop, but the world still didn't know her. Everything changed the morning she heard a strange radio call. She was mid-air, flying a routine pass above the eastern fields. The air was quiet. The day was calm. Then, through her old radio, a voice came crisp. official. Nothing like the usual farm station. Unidentified low-altitude aircraft. State your flight pattern. She froze for a moment. That frequency wasn't used by local planes. She responded politely, giving her name and the crop-dusting route. There was silence for a few seconds. Then another voice came. Deeper, more serious. Viper, is that you? Her heart stopped. No one in the village knew that call sign. No one even knew she had one. She had used it only once, years ago, inside a small online flight simulator group she secretly joined. She flew there at night with pilots from around the world. She was known as Viper, the quiet flyer who could outmaneuver anyone with clean, precise moves. But how did these voices know? She looked up. Far above her, small dots moved in formation. They were fast, sharp, and unmistakable. F-35S. Her breath caught. Why were they here? Why were they calling her? And how did they know her name, her secret flying name? Before she could answer, the radio crackled again. Viper. We've been looking for you. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. The sun had not even touched the cornfields yet, and everything outside felt quiet, almost too quiet. She sat at her small wooden table, staring at her cup of tea as if it held some answer she needed. Her hands were steady, but her mind was not. Something about yesterday kept replaying in her head, the deep rumble in the sky, the strange movement of the aircraft, and the way her heart reacted before her mind even understood what was happening. She stepped outside and looked at the long stretch of road, the field, the open sky. For years, this sky had been her hiding place, her home, her comfort. She had flown old crop-dusting planes, repaired broken engines, and saved the harvest many times. But inside her heart, she carried a different story, one she never shared with anyone in the village. People only knew her as the girl who flies low above the corn. They had no idea why she flew so well, or why she never talked about her past. She walked toward the hangar, hoping that working on her plane would take the strange thoughts out of her mind. But when she opened the door, her breath caught in her chest. There, parked outside the field's boundary, were two large black SUVs. Their windows were dark, and the engines were quietly running. A cold wind moved through the field, even though the air was warm, and she felt something rise inside her, an old instinct waking up. From the vehicles, 3 people stepped out. They were not from the village. Their uniforms were clean, sharp, and official. One of them held a small device in his hand, scanning the field. Another kept looking up at the sky, as if expecting something. She felt her steps slow, her heartbeat become louder. The tallest officer turned toward her and spoke gently. "We're looking for the pilot who was flying this field yesterday." Her mind froze for a moment. She didn't know what to say. She had done nothing wrong, but something told her this wasn't the kind of visit someone could walk away from easily. She simply nodded toward the hangar. "That was me. Why?" All 3 officers exchanged a look, the kind of look that said they already knew the answer but needed to confirm it. The device in the officer's hand beeped, and he turned the screen toward her. It showed a flight path, a recorded signature, and a call sign she had buried years ago. Viper. Her chest tightened. Hearing it was one thing, but seeing it printed again felt like her past had walked straight through the door she tried to lock forever. "That's impossible," she whispered, almost to herself. "I didn't broadcast anything." "You didn't," the officer replied. "But your movements did. Only one pilot in our history flies that low, that precise, and with that kind of control." The F-35's overhead recognized it instantly. She took a step back. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for the world she once escaped to follow her all the way into a quiet life, among corn and silence. "We're not here to arrest you," the officer added quickly, sensing her fear. "We're here because something unusual happened yesterday." The jets on patrol detected an unknown threat. But before they could respond, Someone you moved in a way that only a trained tactical pilot could. Sharp dive, perfect angle, controlled maneuver. The jets thought it was one of their own. She stared at her plane. It looked so small compared to the giant machines in the sky. Yet somehow it had revealed her identity. Why now? She asked softly, almost to the air around her. Why after all this time? The officer looked at her with a seriousness she recognized from her old life. There's an investigation happening. Someone is flying illegally near restricted airspace. The only reason the jets didn't fire is because your call sign stopped them. Her heart dropped. My call sign saved whoever that was? Yes, he said. And that's exactly why we need you. She shook her head. I'm not that pilot anymore. I fly crops. I don't fly. Missions. The officers looked around at her fields, her simple tools, her quiet home. One of them spoke gently. Your hands can pretend to belong here, but your eyes don't. You're watching the sky, even now. She didn't respond. Because he was right. Something inside her had never stopped flying. For a moment, the world stood still. The only sound was the rustle of the corn. Then a loud boom echoed across the sky, deep and distant. All three officers lifted their heads at the same time. Another boom followed. The ground trembled lightly. That's not normal, the officer said, reaching for his radio. She didn't wait for him. She knew the sound. She knew it too well. It wasn't weather. It wasn't thunder. It was something else, something moving faster than anything should move. Without thinking, without planning, she stepped into the hangar and placed her hand on the cold metal body of her plane. The machine felt alive beneath her palm, as if it knew what she was about to do. The officer called out, "Wait!" You don't have to, but she already knew. The sky was calling her again. The world she left behind had come back. And this time, it didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a warning. Asterisk. The next morning felt different for her. She woke up early, before the sun even touched the cornfields. She stood outside her small house, breathing in the cold air, trying to understand why the sound of those jets was still echoing in her mind. Something inside her felt unsettled, like a memory she couldn't fully reach. She kept hearing the same word again and again. Viper. It felt like someone had whispered it directly into her ear. She tried to shake off the feeling and walk toward the old shed where she kept her crop duster plane. The air smelled like dust, fuel, and a little bit of hope. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Morning light came through the broken wooden gaps, shining over the faded paint of her plane, the only thing in her life that made sense. But today, even her plane looked different. She placed her hand on the cold metal, and a strange feeling washed over her. It was almost like she knew this aircraft better than she should. Her fingers traced the side of it, and suddenly, something flashed inside her head, not a picture, but a sound. A sharp, fast beep. A cockpit alarm. She stepped back, confused. She thought maybe she was tired. Maybe her mind was playing games. Still, she brushed it aside and climbed into the small cockpit. The seat felt familiar in a way that made her heart beat faster. She grabbed the controls, and again, she felt something like her hands knew exactly how to move. Like they were remembering a lesson she couldn't recall learning. She sat there quietly, eyes closed, letting the feeling speak to her. She took a slow breath, then opened her eyes. Something inside her whispered, "You've done this before." But that wasn't possible. She was only a crop pilot. She had never been in any fighter jet. She had never trained anywhere special. Her whole life was just this corn, sky, fuel, and silence. But then she remembered what the man at the fuel station had said. The soldiers who came last night, they weren't looking for trouble. They were searching for someone. Someone named Viper, someone whose flying had shocked even their systems. And somehow her little crop duster plane was connected to all of this. Her pulse grew faster as she climbed out of the cockpit. She walked back toward the field, still thinking. The wind blew gently, moving the corn leaves in soft waves. But then she stopped walking. She saw something: tire marks. Large ones. Fresh ones. They led from the dirt road straight toward her shed. She felt her heart tighten. Someone had been here. But who? She knelt down to touch the ground. The marks were clear, and they were from military vehicles. She stood up quickly and looked around. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds were silent. After a few minutes, the silence broke. A sharp hum filled the sky. Not loud, but steady. Familiar. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the rising sun. There was nothing at first, only a bright sky. But then she saw it: one small dark shape, moving slowly above the clouds. It wasn't a bird. It was a drone. A military reconnaissance drone. She froze. The drone moved in a circular pattern, almost like it was searching for something. Then it tilted slightly, as if it had spotted her. She could feel something tighten inside her chest. These machines didn't patrol random farm fields unless they were following a lead. Unless they were tracking a signal. Or a person. Her breath became shallow. She stepped backward, eyes fixed on the sky. The drone circled slower now, like it was trying to confirm something. She couldn't move. She didn't know whether to run or stay still. Then, just as she thought it might come lower, the drone pulled up fast and disappeared into the clouds. She stood there alone, shaking. They were looking for someone. And somehow, it was connected to her. She walked back into the shed and sat on an old wooden crate. Her hands covered her face as she tried to calm her breathing. She didn't understand any of it. Why her? Why here? Why now? She wasn't special. She was just a quiet pilot who flew over cornfields. But deep down, a quiet voice spoke again. A voice she didn't recognize. A voice that didn't feel like her own. You're not just a cornfield pilot. She looked up slowly. Her eyes drifted to a small metal box on the shelf, something she had found months ago near the field. She never opened it. She just kept it there because something about it felt important, even though she couldn't explain why. Now, that little box felt like it was staring back at her. She stood up and reached for it. Her hands shook. The metal was cold. Heavier than she remembered. She sat down again and took a deep breath. She clicked it open. Inside, there was a small badge, dark blue with a symbol she didn't recognize. Under it, a call sign was written in tiny letters. Her heart dropped. It said, Viper. She felt the world tilt for a moment. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled as she stared at the name. A call sign she had no memory of, but a call sign that F-35 pilots had recognized. She leaned back, mind spinning, heart pounding. She wasn't supposed to know this name, but somehow, it was hers. And now she knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger than her cornfields, her small plane, or her quiet life. Something she had forgotten, or something someone had hidden from her. The next morning, the air around the small family farm felt different. It wasn't the usual quiet wind moving through the cornfields. It wasn't the sound of birds or the tractors waking up. It felt like the world itself was waiting for something. And in the middle of that strange calm, she sat on an old wooden chair outside her small house, staring at the sky like she expected it to talk. Her hands were wrapped around a cup of warm tea, but she barely took a sip. Her mind kept replaying the same moment from the day before, the moment the F-35 pilots said her old call sign out loud. Viper. She hadn't heard that name in years. It felt like a ghost of her past had suddenly stepped into her quiet life. She looked at her small, crop-dusting plane parked near the barn. The yellow paint had faded, the body had scratches from rough landings, and one wing still had a dent from an old storm. It was nothing compared to the jets that roared above her yesterday. But to her, it was home. It kept her connected to the sky. Just then, a truck pulled up near her house, and her heart sank a little. She knew the sound of that engine. It was the sound of someone bringing news she wasn't ready for. The truck door opened, and a tall man stepped out. He wasn't dressed like military, but he carried himself like someone who spent years around bases and hangars. He walked toward her with a respectful smile. "Morning," he said gently. She nodded. "Morning." He didn't waste time. "I suppose you already know why I'm here." She looked down at her hands. "Because they heard the call sign?" He nodded. "Because we all heard it." A long silence stretched between them. She could feel her heart beating harder than it should. She had left that world behind for reasons she didn't want to say out loud. The uniform, the missions, the pressure, the responsibility, all of it was part of a life she had closed the door on. The cornfields were supposed to be her new beginning. "I'm not going back," she said softly. The man pulled out a folder from his bag and placed it on the chair beside her. "I'm not here to convince you to return. But I'm here because something is happening in the skies near this town. Something unusual. And the pilots think you might have seen something from the ground." She blinked. She wasn't expecting that. "Seen what?" He looked around the quiet farm, like someone worried about being overheard. "Strange radar returns. Unknown objects. Fast movements. No ID signals. And yesterday, when your voice came on the emergency channel, the readings changed suddenly. As if," he paused, "as if whatever was out there was reacting to you." She frowned. "Reacting to me? That doesn't make any sense." "That's exactly why we need your eyes," he replied. She leaned back, thinking deeply. She had seen strange lights recently, tiny flashes over the fields at night. Quick shadows moving across clouds when no planes were scheduled to fly. She had ignored them, thinking maybe it was her old pilot instincts making her imagine things. But maybe it wasn't imagination. Maybe something was there. The man continued. "You know the sky better than anyone here. The way you talk to it, the way you read it, it's not something we can teach. It's something you were born with." She stared at him, unsure how to respond. He wasn't wrong. Flying wasn't a skill for her. It was a feeling, like breathing. Then he said something that hit her harder than she expected. "Viper. You didn't choose that call sign. You earned it." Her breath caught in her chest. No one had said those words to her in years. The man took a step back. "We're not asking you to fight. Not asking you to return to the service. Only to help us understand what you've been seeing." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up at the sky again. A few clouds drifted slowly across the blue. Her mind replayed the late-night flashes she had seen above the cornfields, the patterns that didn't match any aircraft she knew. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all we ask." He walked back to his truck and drove away, leaving a trail of dust behind. But she didn't move. She sat there, staring at the open skies, feeling something heavy, something she couldn't name, pressing on her chest. Her peaceful, simple life in the cornfields was changing. She could feel it like the shift in wind before a storm. Later that afternoon, she went to the barn and ran her hand across the wing of her old crop-dusting plane. It wasn't built for anything dangerous. It wasn't fast. It wasn't powerful. But it was hers. And maybe, just maybe, it still had one important purpose left. As evening rolled in, she took the plane out for a short flight. The sunset painted the sky in bright orange and deep purple. She lifted off the field gently, climbing toward the clouds. From above, the town looked peaceful, but then she saw it, a sudden white flash far in the distance. Then another, quiet, fast, too fast. She tightened her grip on the my. Controls. It wasn't her imagination. Something was up there. Something watching, something waiting, and she knew, whether she wanted it or not. Her call sign wasn't done with her yet. Asterisk, the air inside the military base felt heavier than usual when she walked in the next morning. She didn't wear a flight suit this time. Just a simple jacket, dusty shoes, and the same quiet confidence she always had. But even without the uniform, everyone could tell she wasn't ordinary. Something in the way she moved. Calm, sharp, aware of every corner. People whispered as she passed. Some had watched her emergency landing footage a dozen times. Others only knew the rumor. The cornfield pilot with the old crop duster outflew an F-35. No one said it out loud. But the respect in their eyes said enough. She reached the briefing room where two senior officers were waiting. They stood up the moment she entered. Not because of rank, she had none here, but because of presence. She nodded once, the same way she would nod at an engine that had finally stopped screaming mid-air. They offered her a seat, but she remained standing. She wasn't here to be honored or treated like a hero. She only needed answers. Why had modern jets called her by a call sign she had buried years ago? Why did they sound like they already knew her? One officer opened a folder. Inside were printed radar tracks, radio transcripts, and photos. She didn't need to look at the words. She already knew what they contained. The chase. The near stall. The impossible turn she made with a plane that shouldn't have survived. But she did look at one page, the one that showed her call sign glowing on the radar screen. Viper. She felt a strange mix of heaviness and clarity. She had promised herself she would never fly anything serious again. Not after the loss she carried. Not after the breakup of the old squad she once led. But the sky had a strange way of pulling her back. Even when she tried to run, the officers asked her a series of questions about her flying history. She answered in short, honest lines. She told them she used to fly in competitions. She learned aerobatics before she learned to drive. She trained in a special civilian military program long ago, something small, experimental, forgotten by most people. She never mentioned the hardest part, the teammate she failed to save. The day she earned the call sign Viper, not because she was dangerous, but because she struck fast in a dangerous situation. Trying to pull someone out of a burning cockpit, the senior officer watched her eyes carefully. "You didn't hesitate yesterday," he said softly. "Every move was clean. You didn't even panic when you lost altitude." She shrugged. "Altitude is only scary if you don't trust the wind." It sounded simple, but the room went silent. They realized this wasn't arrogance. It was experience. Experience so deep that fear no longer made her freeze. It made her sharpen. Then came the question she had been waiting for, the one that would decide everything. Why did you never apply for the official track? With your skills, you would have been one of the finest. She looked at the floor for a long moment. She could still hear the scream of metal twisting in that old crash. She still remembered the hand she couldn't reach in time. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and spoke in a quiet voice. "I didn't think I deserved the sky anymore." The officers understood. Not fully, but enough. The younger officer slid a sealed envelope across the table. "The F-35 pilots want to speak with you." They requested it personally. She could hear the respect in his voice. They said, "They owe you." She didn't open the envelope. She didn't need to. She already knew what the meeting would be. A conversation with the very pilots whose jets bowed their wings toward her crop duster. A team that recognized her call sign, even when she had tried so hard to forget it. When she stepped back outside into the sunlight, she didn't rush. She walked slowly across the concrete, letting the morning wind sweep across her face. She looked up and saw two F-35s taking off in perfect formation, engines glowing blue. Their shadow passed over her like a giant bird spreading its wings. She didn't feel fear. She didn't feel pressure. Only something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. But just as she started to walk toward the exit gate, A voice called after her. She turned. It was the commander, jogging to catch up. He stopped in front of her, breathing hard. "We ran your old file," he said. "There's something you need to know." She waited. "You weren't just good," he said. "You were the reason that program even existed. You were the youngest pilot to pull off a recovery maneuver that even our trained officers failed to perform. Your instructor wrote that your instincts were almost impossible." He took a breath. "And yesterday proved she was right." She looked away, fighting the old ache inside her chest. She didn't want new praise. Praise always came with invitations. Invitations came with pressure. And pressure came with memories. But then the commander added something she didn't expect. Something that made her heart stop for a moment. One of the 35 pilots said something when he saw your call sign. Something you should hear before you walk away again. She frowned. What did he say? The commander smiled softly. He said, "If that's Viper, we fly behind her, not ahead." She didn't know whether to breathe or freeze. For the first time in years, the sky didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a door opening again, quietly, gently, patiently, waiting for her. The moment the runway lights of the airbase came into view, she felt her heartbeat grow faster. She had flown old farm planes all her life, taken care of engines with her own hands, and practiced every skill quietly in the open fields behind her home. But she had never imagined a day when she would be landing beside jets worth millions, machines flown by people who had spent their whole lives in top academies. She tried to slow her breathing as the emergency response team guided her to a stop. She kept thinking that all this felt too big, too unreal, too far from the life she had always known. But she reminded herself that she had done what she could, and she had tried her best. As she stepped out of the jet, her legs trembled a little. The ground crew came rushing forward, not with anger or suspicion, but with relief. They weren't looking at her as some outsider who had taken control of an aircraft she didn't belong in. They looked at her like someone who had saved lives. One of them quietly whispered, "Viper did it again," and she almost turned around, unsure if they were actually talking about her. She felt almost embarrassed. She had never gotten used to praise, especially from people who worked with machines far more advanced than anything she had ever touched. The F-35 pilots who had escorted her were waiting nearby. The one who had spoken earlier walked toward her first, taking off his helmet and resting it under his arm. There was a softness in his eyes now, nothing like the sharp military tone she had heard in the air. He looked at her like he already knew her story, like he understood the years she had spent flying alone, fixing engines by herself, waiting for a chance that never came. "You flew that jet like you were born in the sky," he said, voice calm and steady. "And your radio call, I thought I was hearing a ghost." She didn't know what to say. Compliments always made her uncomfortable, especially ones like these. She tried to brush it away, telling him she only did what she had to. But he shook his head gently. "No," he said, "you flew with instinct and control that you can't fake. That call sign isn't a mistake. No one forgets a pilot like Viper." The words made her chest tighten. She felt the past rising again, the one she had tried to bury, the dreams she had quietly folded away. She remembered the training she never got to complete, the badge she almost earned, the opportunity that slipped away only because her life had taken a different path. She remembered the small airstrip where she first learned how to fly. She remembered people telling her that dreams didn't belong to someone with her background. But she never let the sky go. She kept flying in whatever plane she could touch. And tonight, all those lost pieces felt like they were returning one by one. When the senior officer approached, she braced herself, expecting questions, maybe strict warnings. But instead, he simply asked her to walk with him. They moved away from the busy lights of the runway, stopping near the quiet edge of the airbase. He spoke slowly, almost fatherly, as if he didn't want to overwhelm her. "People like you," he said, "don't appear often. You flew under pressure that breaks most trained pilots. And you didn't freeze, not even once." She lowered her eyes. "I didn't have time to freeze," she said softly. "The jet needed someone to bring it down safe. That's all I focused on." "That's what makes you different," he replied. "Real pilots don't just handle the plane. They calm the sky." His words felt heavy, but warm. Like he wasn't just evaluating her skill, he was seeing her. When they walked back toward the others, she noticed the F-35 pilots standing together, speaking quietly. The moment they saw her returning, they stopped talking and looked up. Something about their silence made her nervous, like they were considering something important. The officer who had walked with her stepped forward and addressed his team in a firm voice, almost ceremonial. "This pilot brought our jet home when no one else could. And she did it with a call sign we all know, Viper." The pilots nodded slowly, not questioning, not doubting. They accepted it like it was a truth written in the sky long before tonight. One of them stepped forward, offering her a small patch of simple fabric piece worn on the flight suits of real pilots. She stared at it, hands trembling slightly. She didn't know if she should take it, if she even deserved it. But the pilot gently pressed it into her hand and said, "Legends don't always come from academies. Sometimes they come from cornfields." Her eyes suddenly felt warm. She looked away for a moment, trying to hide the emotion rising inside. She had never cried in front of strangers, but tonight everything felt overwhelming. All the years of flying alone, all the memories of being told she was just a farm pilot, all the dreams she kept locked inside her chest, they all came crashing back. She thought the night was ending, but something bigger was still waiting. The senior officer stepped closer and said something she never expected to hear in her entire life. "Viper, we need to talk about your future." The next morning after the strange incident in the sky, she woke up early, long before the sun touched the wide golden fields. She didn't tell anyone what happened. She just sat by the old wooden table in her small farmhouse and tried to understand how a rescue helicopter could appear exactly at the right moment. It felt almost impossible. A part of her wanted to believe it was luck, but another part of her heart whispered something else. Something she thought she left behind years ago. She went outside to her small farmhouse runway, the same place where she taught herself flying as a teenager. Her old single-engine crop duster stood quietly, just as tired as she felt inside. When she touched the cold metal, memories rushed back: fast flights, sharp turns, training drills she once practiced in secret, and a voice calling her on the radio using a name she never forgot, Viper. She shook her head, as if trying to push those memories away. That life was gone. She was just a cornfield pilot now, spraying crops, fixing broken wings, and keeping her dreams hidden. But the sky didn't let her hide for long. Around noon, when she began her routine flight, she noticed something strange on her small radar screen. An aircraft signature that shouldn't be flying so low in this quiet farming area. She looked up, scanning the clouds, and suddenly she spotted it. A jet streaked across the sky, far too fast and far too silent to be normal. It wasn't a cargo plane. It wasn't a passenger jet. It was something she recognized instantly. Her heart stopped for a moment. It was a military jet, sleek, sharp, and moving like a shadow. It passed overhead, but then it slowed. No jet does that in this area. Not without a reason. She tightened her grip on her controls, trying to act normal. But inside, her heartbeat felt like thunder. Why would a military jet fly here? Why now? Then things turned even stranger. Her old radio crackled, something that never happened while she was this high in the air. The voice on the other side sounded shocked, confused, almost unsure. "Unidentified crop aircraft. Your flight pattern is unusual. State your call sign." She froze. Her call sign? She hadn't used a call sign in years. Farmers didn't use call signs. No one here even knew she ever had one. She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. If she said nothing, she would look suspicious. If she said the truth, everything she worked to hide would break open. She finally pressed the button and spoke softly, hoping the wind would swallow her words. "This is just a cornfield pilot," she said. "No call sign." But the radio didn't stay silent. The voice returned, more serious now, negative. "Your maneuver before takeoff this morning. That wasn't civilian. Identify yourself." She almost dropped the radio. How did they know about her maneuver? That early morning turn she thought no one saw? That single smooth move she made out of old habit? It lasted less than 4 seconds. Yet someone noticed, someone who knew what a military maneuver looked like. She tried to calm her breath, but her hands trembled slightly. The sky suddenly felt small, like it was closing around her. "Pilot, identify yourself," the voice repeated. She looked at the wide fields below, the simple life she had built, the quiet days she chose. She didn't want trouble, and she didn't want attention. She wanted peace, but some pasts don't stay buried. Some call signs don't die. She finally whispered something she hadn't said in years, something she thought she would never speak again. "Viper." The radio went silent. Not a second later, the jet above her looped around so suddenly that she gasped. It wasn't a normal turn. It was a recognition turn. The jet had heard the name. The jet had recognized the name, and whoever was inside. That cockpit knew exactly who Viper was, before she could even understand what she had done. The radio crackled again, this time with a voice filled with disbelief, and something she couldn't read. "Viper, you're alive?" Her eyes widened, her breath stopped, and her heart hit her ribs so hard it hurt. Nobody in her quiet town knew that name. Nobody in the farming world knew her past, but in the sky, someone remembered. And that meant only one thing. Her old life wasn't finished with her. It was coming back.